the Roots of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Now, if you are new here, welcome. It's always so lovely having new people listening to the show. As always, for the fans who keep on returning, man, I love you guys so much. Thank you for always tuning in and listening and reviewing. And remember that if you want to comment, you can drop us your review either on our social media pages. So that is at the Root of the Sci Pod on Instagram or Twitter. Send me a DM, or you can join the Facebook group, which is the Root of the Science podcast, and you can also give your opinions there. Most importantly, if you are on Apple Podcast, you are also able to leave a review. So now, speaking of all of these wonderful places, always remember that you can subscribe to your Apple Podcast, your Google, your Spotify, so that you're always in the know when a new episode drops. Now, let's get into today's episode. My guest today is Oageng Modise from South Africa. He is a PhD student in entomology, which is based on the study of insects. In this episode, we hear about his science journey that starts with zoology and biology in undergraduate level. We then get to learn about his current PhD project that focuses on fly pollination. Yes, you heard right, not bees, but flies. He tells us about this work and its importance. Next, we then chat about the lack of representation of people of color in the field of entomology, and Oageng tells us his views on how we can get more people involved. Tune in as we hear about all of this and, of course, so much more. Let's go. Hi, Oageng. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Anne. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you. You're like one of our last guests for the year, so I'm really excited. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
It's exciting. I'm glad to be here.
All right, great. So before we get things started, can you just give us a brief introduction? Who is Oageng? Where are you from? Where are you currently based? And just briefly, what are you currently doing?
I am Oageng Modise. I'm originally from, should I say Northwest? I was technically born in Gauteng, but I grew up in the Northwest. And I moved back to Gauteng for varsity. And right now, I'm currently based in KZN.
Whoop, whoop.
Never thought I'll be here, but I am here. And so I'm currently doing my first year PhD at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, and I'm working on pollination. So I'm in the pollination biology field.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, me in a nutshell.
Oh, great. Yeah, welcome to KZN. I like how you said that you never thought you'd be here.
Yeah,
but yet here you are. We are glad to have you, even if it wasn't always part of the plan. But before we get into everything that you do, Oageng, we have to understand you away from the sciences, because you are obviously a human being away from everything that you do, right?
Yeah.
Can you just tell us some things about yourself on a personal level? Who are you apart from being a PhD student? What makes you tick? Just shortly, what are some of the things that you love that interest you away from the science?
So I would describe myself as a simple person. I'm into music. I think I listen to music almost every day, all day. I'm a huge fan of cars also. I love cars to bits. And what else do I enjoy reading. I read a lot also. And yeah, besides all of that, I love being outside. I love being in the field. I love being, in nature, connecting with nature. And yeah, that's all I do. That's me.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so you mentioned that you're a big car fan, right? So what is your poison? What is your dream car? Do you have one or do you have several?
I have one. It's a BMW M5.
Okay, sure. At least it's a car that I know. I thought you were gonna say something wild because I'm not great with cars. I was like, okay, I need to take out my phone. All right, I know that one. All right. So are you like
I'm a huge BMW fan.
oh, fantastic. Is this a manual or is this an automatic?
It's an automatic.
Okay. All right. No.
It's very fast,
Uh-huh.
powerful, and beautiful. Everything.
In what color? I'm sure you have a color in your head.
It's actually blue.
Oh,
It
nice.
has to be. Yeah.
Nice. All right. No, don't worry. It's coming when you become Dr. Modise. It's gonna come,
It will. I receive.
Yes, it's gonna come. No, great. We love to hear that you have this fascination. And you also mentioned you love books. So you like to read rather. What sort of stuff are you into away from these scientific journals, of course?
Yes, I read fiction. So I'm currently reading this Jack Reacher series.
Okay. Wait.
Yeah.
I
think I'm on like the 6th book.
Isn't there a movie with Tom Cruise?
Yes, there is a movie. And yes, there's 2 movies. Yeah.
I was watching it the other day. Literally, I was watching that movie. Oh wow, I didn't know that it's based off a book. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it's based on the book.
Have you watched the movie?
I've watched the first one. I know there's 2. I haven't watched the second one.
And when you've read the book now, did it give the book justice, or was it, how the creative direction goes a little bit different?
On the character-wise, yes, the character is the same. Superhero, steering, a savior. But I prefer a book.
Okay.
Yeah, there's so much you can imagine from reading a book compared to from a movie, because I'm pretty sure when they make a movie they can't put all the points there.
Yeah.
But when you read, you visualize everything.
Yeah, and that's a beauty of reading, though.
Yeah.
Okay, great. No, so we've understood you love the outdoors, you love cars, and you love to read. All right. So the outdoors part obviously comes in nicely with what you do with your field of study. So does this mean that you were always a fan of the outdoors? And then what was the reason? How did you get into science? What was, what did you always know, like, this is the field that I want to get into? Or was it one of those things that sort of just happened?
I think I would say I always knew I would go into the science field. Yeah, from where I grew up. So I grew up in a rural area back in Northwest. So I was always surrounded by, trees, grasses everywhere, animals, like you would encounter a snake a lot of times outside, insects everywhere, So I always knew that at some point I would go into science because I've been exposed to the outdoors ever since I was a kid. So I always knew that that's what I want to do.
So was it because of the stuff that you saw outside, like curiosity, or was it like TV shows that you're watching? Like how because you mentioned that you are in the rural areas. So how does a young Oageng be like, okay, science is that field that I'm going to do that, involves these 2 things?
So I would say back then, I didn't know much about it, but I would say I liked being outside than, watching TV, being indoors. So when I started growing up and, I was introduced to like natural science, started doing natural science, and I was like, oh, then I put 2 and 2 together, And yeah, ever since that time, I've always loved natural science and then life sciences, and that's where I am now.
So the biology of it. All right. So can you take us through the academic journey after you finish matric, right? Because you're studying entomology. You don't always go straight from matric to even entomology. And even then, like, how did you end up? Can you take us to that journey of where you ended up from your undergraduate level until your where you are right now? So just journey us through, how did you start? Because I think you don't just go straight into first year and you're like, this is the specialization that I'm doing.
So going into first year, I always loved life sciences and also geography.
Okay.
So it was always like a battle what do I want to do? And yeah, so in first year, for my first degree, I did zoology and geography,
Okay.
which was really great because I can do both things that I like. So I did zoology and geography. And after that, in my honors, I had to choose between geography and zoology because I was already exposed to, like zoology, because my previous supervisor took me in when I was doing my second year. So I got exposed to, the lab or everything related to zoology while I was still doing undergrad. So from there on, I decided to continue with zoology. And in zoology, I was basically, so in my honors and my master's, I was basically looking at the diversity of springtails, which are also insects.
Okay.
So I was focusing on the diversity, like which species are where. And eventually I decided I need to broaden up my space. And that's when I came to UKZN to do, like flies. Now I'm doing like entomology. I'm looking at flies.
Okay. Wow. So wait, for your masters and your honors, etc., which institution were you at?
I was at UJ.
Oh, okay, University of Johannesburg, and then you decided to come this side. All right. You are working on flies. All right. I'm gonna ask you to take us through because can you tell us more about your PhD research, what you're currently doing, and just sort of like teach us, on why it's so important.
Yeah. So for my PhD, I'm looking at fly pollination, but specifically in high elevation. So like, up the mountain. And the main reason for this PhD project is that, not a lot of attention is given to fly pollination. Most pollination studies focus on bees because bees are like, the most important pollinators.
Yeah.
But a lot of people also don't know that flies also contribute a lot to pollination. I mean, flies are like the second most important pollinators after bees.
Wow.
Yet a lot of people don't know that. Most people think when they see flies, they're like, oh, flies are pests, flies are, dirty and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they also don't know that they contribute a lot to, provision of ecosystem services in terms of pollination. Because without flies, a lot of plants, more especially in high elevation like regions, all those plants would die out if it wasn't for these flies. So for my PhD, I'm looking at these flies and their contribution to pollination. So I'm basically looking at different plant species that have been seen to be visited by flies, but we are not sure whether these flies contribute to pollination or whether these flies visit these flowers to, get some sort of reward, such as nectar, or do they lay their eggs on these flowers? So that's where I come in. So I basically investigate whether these flowers rely on these flies for pollination or not. And yeah, on top of that, also, we've also noticed that these flowers that I'm looking at, they produce, like funky smells, like unlike roses, like roses smell nice.
Yes.
And all of these flowers, they do not smell nice at all.
Okay.
They smell like pee, they smell like poo, they smell like rotten meat.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because they produce these smells in order to attract these flies.
Yeah.
Because, like flies are attracted to these kind of smells.
Yeah.
Yeah, so now I'm trying to, for my PhD, I'm going to look at which exact compounds in these smells attract these flies.
Wow.
It is very interesting.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. Do you by any chance know the common and the scientific name? No pressure.
So these flowers are called angiosperms.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. No, Oageng, like you were so spot on in the beginning, because like I'm sure when you tell people, even when I was reading about what your research is about, I was like, flies, oh my gosh, and in South Africa, it's summer here. So the flies will not leave us alone. I think there was even last year where I just felt like the flies were just crazy. And like you said, we see them as pests. Most people see them as pests, right? We don't understand their benefits because to us it just seems they are bothering us. They poo in our food or vomit. I don't know what that thing is, but they do those things and it's disgusting. It's gross. They are attracted to those weird smells, like you said. So it's quite interesting that you said that flies after bees because, bees have got such good PR. Like bees are the life force. They are the things that, so it's quite interesting that you said that after bees, they are the most second important pollinators. And it just goes to show why your research is so important. And maybe, after your investigations and your findings that you find conducting this research, maybe the PR, for flies, they can get a better name, right?
Yeah, that's
No, that's so interesting. I love it. Okay, so would you call yourself an entomologist, or are you saying you are working towards an entomologist and to being an entomologist?
I would say I am an entomologist, but I would also say in a broad sense, I'm a biologist.
All right. Okay, so
because on top of studying entomology, I'm also looking at the whole interaction between plants and insects.
So for someone who does not know what an entomologist is, right? We kind of skimmed over that part. Can you just explain to a layperson, what does an entomologist do? Like for you, what does your work involve, or would it involve in a normal everyday general setting? What is an entomologist?
So basically an entomologist is someone who studies, insects.
Mm-hmm.
And the way someone studies insects can, vary in like a lot of sense. So you could study insects by looking at old museum collections and trying to re-identify insects,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of these scientific names tend to change as time goes. You find that some insects were classified in another name, but that wasn't correct because not enough research was done on
Mm-hmm.
that. So you could study insects by, classifying insects and renaming insects, or just like what I'm doing, basically looking at their interactions with the environment. You could also study insects in terms of, using them as indicators of environmental change.
Mm-hmm.
More, especially now during climate change and, global warming, these insects can tell a lot about how the environment is changing because they are in direct contact with the environment. So they change as the environment changes.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, that's basically what an entomologist does. You study insects and in a broad sense.
Yeah. It's quite interesting that you brought up the museum aspect of it because it's very broad. You can also be, you can work in the museum, and I think you can also work in the lab, and you can also work in the field, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, you can also work at farms.
Okay.
Because in order to produce food, those food, in order to produce fruits, they rely on insects and other pollinators.
Wow, that's so interesting. So this is very, very broad, and I hope for somebody who didn't know, this can sort of interest them. And this is a follow-up question, Oageng. When you think of these types of fields, be it entomology, zoology, previously there's not a lot of people of color in those fields, right? So given your time that you've been doing, obviously you're really passionate about this. How has your experience been being a person of color in this field? Is it opening up? Are there more people getting into this field, or there's still a space for more people of color to actually join this field?
From my personal experience, I would say there's still more for people of color. Yes, now there's an increase in people of color in this field, but we still have a long way to go. And I would say this, it's because most people of color are not exposed to these opportunities from a very young age. So these things are not known while you're still very young. So I would say that there's still room for.
So what do you think needs to be done? What more needs to be done? Because you mentioned that it's because for example, Black kids or, African kids, even at a more continental level, or even other races like people of color, they are unexposed to these fields. So what do you think needs to be done for us to get more people who look and sound, like one of us into these fields? In your opinion, though, of course.
For me, I would say, exposure. I would say, especially us who are already in this field, people of color in this field, I feel like it is up to us to put what we do out there so that more people of color can be interested in what we're doing and in this field. And in order to do that, we need to advertise what we do. We need to tell people what we do. We need to reach out to like schools and tell the learners that there's more opportunities out there. They shouldn't only focus on, doing engineering, want to become a doctor, and all of it. They need to know that there's a whole lot of research that can be done. And also we need more people into this field.
And, just to bring back to you, remember when I sent you the message, when I got into your DM, I was so excited because I have not spoken to an entomologist, number one, but it even made me more excited that it was a Black guy, a Black South African guy who is an entomologist. Because for me, I think I did a brief course in plant protection in my undergraduate level. And we had to do a bit of like entomology, like you said, that in farms, because I'm doing agriculture. In farms, we need to sort of have an understanding of some of these insects that actually affect or can actually damage, your crops when you're growing them in the farms. So the entomologist who was teaching us, he was a white old male, and he had an assistant, and the assistant also was white. So for me, I was like, never in my wildest dreams did it come to me where I was like, this is something that a Black person would actually be doing. So it's a norm for us to be seeing, white people or Western people doing this. So the brain gets so excited, like, wow, you are doing this. So that's why I'm really excited. And I firmly agree with you about the exposure thing. It is so, so, so vital. And I hope, more kids can actually learn. And sometimes, okay, to be fair, I'm really scared of bugs of insects. I won't even lie. For me, it is a miss. I don't know, man. I'm really scared of such things. So I don't know. I wouldn't actually. Oh no, but it's the thing. Didn't you have that? Were you always just curious about it? You were never scared of these insects?
Well, I was always scared of things like bees because they bite and other things, but like flies and bats. And no, I don't know. I don't think I wasn't.
All right, no, for me, I just think of creepy crawly things, but I think it's because, like I said, they have a bad PR, is that these things will bite you or whatever. So if we have more information, I don't know, spiders are actually, because they could be some spiders that are beneficial, I don't know, I'm just assuming this, but because we just have this bad connotation of spiders or creepy crawly insects, so it challenges the brain and it shifts the brain to be like, oh, actually maybe it's not so bad if somebody's actually studying on these insects. So I really appreciate your field. It's going to make me have a second look at flies specifically.
Yeah. And also I feel like it also comes down to the information we got as kids. When we were growing up, we used to be told, no, these things are, pests, they're irritating, they're dirty. But then when you grow up, if you don't think about these things and obtain more information on your own, then you're never gonna know if what you know is true or not. So I feel like we always have to be open-minded about these things. So you mustn't always just take information that we get, but you must try and expand on it for ourselves.
No, you're right. You're right. It's because of what we're told, but as you learn for yourself, you're like, okay, it's not so bad. So no, I hear you. I hear you so much. And oh, sorry. I think we've already done that. Okay, so you have gone this far in your academic career. What has kept you motivated and what has kept you going to be like you want to take yourself to this level of a PhD level? Because I mean, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy, and I'm sure it hasn't always been easy. So what has motivated you and what's motivating you to go and fetch that red gown? Yeah.
I mean, the ultimate goal is the red gown. You know what I'm but yeah, besides the red gown, I mean, I think what motivates me is, first of all, me. I know what I want. And for me, I want to get my PhD and ultimately become a lecturer and a researcher and give back to, communities, teach and, give sort of, how do I say it? Give back, the knowledge that I know and I have. So one of the biggest motivator I would say is me, but also my family plays a huge role. Okay? So, I mean, my family have always supported me in whatever I want to do. And that's a plus. And also what motivates me is I would say the people around me. So and by saying the people around me, I mean like, lecturers and teachers that I know and I've encountered throughout my journey. And yeah, I see myself, along on the same level.
I love that,
and that's where I want to be.
Because, there has to be, as much as the red gown is the end goal, sometimes we need to have a deeper reason to keep going on, because it's not always going to be easy. So the fact that for you, it's your circle, be it your friends or your fellow academics, or even your family, I think, and also, like you said, that you have this vision or this goal for yourself of where you want to be and what you want to do, that I think is always going to be something that you sort of can go back on when it gets really hard. And I know for me, my supervisor always says, the PhD is not hard. Not saying that, he's like, it's because for you to get to the PhD, it's not like hard in terms of like smartness. It doesn't really test your intellect. It tests more of your level of perseverance and grit and keeping on going, So the fact that you are doing your PhD, you should know that you have the intellectual capacity. But what really tests you is how you keep going.
Not giving
because
up.
Yeah,
Very
hey? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And on that note, as we are wrapping up, I just wanted to ask you if you have any sort of advice or some golden nuggets that you can share, given everything that you have gone through and some of the life lessons that you've learned so far.
My advice would be, you need to be passionate about what you want to do. And you need to be, you need to give it your all. Because that's the only way you will succeed. And also not giving up. I feel like that is very important. And also having a goal. It won't be as nice and enjoyable if you don't have an end goal in mind. So you need to know that whatever you are doing and whatever you are working on will ultimately lead to you reaching the goal that you have for yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, what a beautiful piece of advice. And I really appreciate your words. And I hope that somebody listening is inspired and is motivated. And also just thank you so much for shedding a light on a field that not many of us have heard of. And I wish you all of the best in everything that you're going to do. And yes, so all of the best.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah.
I had so much fun. It was so great having you. Yeah, and we'll definitely talk when you get that red gown and you are when you are Dr. Modise with your M5. Yeah, it's happening. All of it.
Yes, it will definitely happen.
Yes. And to everybody else who's listening, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of The Root of the Science podcast with your girl, Anne with an E. Until next time, goodbye.